The stars looked different from Kepler 442b. Dr. Teo stood at the window of the human settlement, watching the sun set over the red and orange horizon. Earth felt very far away now. Behind him, his team was working in the research station, checking equipment and preparing reports for the home office. They had been on this planet for 8 months now, and everything was going well. Too well, perhaps. Life in space was rarely this calm. A message alert beeped on Teo's wrist device. He looked at it and frowned. The Galactic Classification System had completed its automated scan of the human settlement. This was normal. The system scanned all new colonies and sent back data about the planet's conditions, resources, and the health of the people living there. Teo opened the report and started reading. At first, everything seemed routine. The report listed the colony's location, population size, and basic health information. But then Teo's eyes stopped on a section labeled Biological Assessment. He read the words slowly, not quite understanding what he was seeing. The system had not just measured the humans' health, it had measured everything about them: their bone density, their muscle composition, their cellular regeneration rates, their ability to heal from injuries. Every physical measurement was listed in exact numbers compared to databases of thousands of other species. Teo called Jiwoo, his communications officer, to his office. Jiwoo was young and smart, always quick to understand complex information. When he read the report, his face went pale. "This doesn't look good," Jiwoo said quietly. Teo agreed. The system had compared human bone density to many alien species. Compared to the delicate Aryans, humans had bones that were nearly 3 times stronger. Compared to the silicon-based Corvan, humans had calcium levels that were much higher. The system found that humans could heal from broken bones without needing outside help or technology, something very rare among advanced species. The system's computers worked through the data carefully. They looked at every number, ran every comparison, and reached a conclusion. The words appeared in red letters at the bottom of the report. Classification: naturally armored species. Threat level: Tier 3. "They think we're weapons," Jiwoo whispered. Over the next few hours, more information flooded in. The classification was spreading across the network of the hegemony of 7 worlds. Thousands of alien governments, military commanders, and officials were reading the same report. Humans were not just another species that had learned to travel between stars. Humans were dangerous. Humans had natural armor built into their very bodies. In the command center of the settlement, the team watched as their communications systems lit up with incoming messages. News channels across the galaxy were already starting to report on the discovery. Some headlines were angry, some were afraid. A few were already calling for humans to be locked away or studied before they could become a threat to galactic peace. Dr. Mi-sun, Teo's second-in-command, came to his office with worry in her eyes. She was older than Teo, with gray in her hair and decades of experience in space exploration. She had seen many strange things, but nothing like this. "We need to respond," Mi-sun said. "We need to tell them that this is wrong. That high bone density doesn't mean we're weapons." But Teo knew it would not be that simple. Numbers were easy to understand. They did not require explanation or context. The hegemony's automated systems had measured, compared, and made a decision. That decision would be very hard to change. Yunji, one of the colony's biologists, entered the command center with papers in her hands. She had been working on her own research when she heard the news. Now she looked upset and confused. "My bone density is high because I grew up on Earth," Yunji said, her voice shaking slightly. "Earth has high gravity. Our bodies adapted. That's not armor. That's just biology. That's just how humans work." The other team members nodded. They all knew this. They all understood the simple truth. But they also understood that the galaxy did not. Over the next few hours, Teo tried to contact the hegemony. He sent messages explaining the truth about human biology. He sent scientific papers explaining Earth's gravity and how it shaped human evolution. He sent images and data showing that humans were not soldiers or weapons. They were explorers and scientists, just like the thousands of other species in the galaxy. But his messages seemed to disappear into the vast space between worlds. Or perhaps they were received and ignored. Either way, no one answered. Then Jiwoo received a message that made everyone in the room go silent. Ships were coming. A lot of ships. The hegemony of 7 worlds was sending a large force to the human settlement. The message said the ships would arrive in 4 days. No one on the human team slept well that night. They sat in the common area, drinking hot tea and talking quietly about what might happen. Would they be arrested? Would they be taken away? Would the hegemony decide that humans were too dangerous to live? Teo tried to stay calm and think like a scientist. The hegemony was advanced and logical, he told himself. Once they understood the truth, they would change their minds. Once they met real humans and saw that they were peaceful, the fear would go away. But as he looked at his team's frightened faces, he was not sure if he believed his own words. The 4 days passed slowly. The human settlement prepared for visitors, though no one knew what those visitors would want or how they would behave. The team cleaned the research station and prepared data and information. They tried to look peaceful and non-threatening, though they were not sure how to do that when they were already classified as naturally armored weapons. On the 4th day, the hegemony ships appeared in the sky above Kepler 442b. They were large and beautiful, built with technology that humans could barely understand. As the ships descended toward the settlement, Teo stood with his team and waited. The ships landed with a soft humming sound. A ramp lowered, and figures began to walk down toward the humans waiting below. The first figure to emerge was tall and elegant, with skin that seemed to glow with soft light. She wore official robes and carried a datapad in her delicate hands. This was Ambassador Vesper, an ethereal from the hegemony's diplomatic corps. She looked at the gathered humans with careful eyes, as if she was studying something strange and potentially dangerous. "I am Ambassador Vesper," she said, her voice clear and calm. "I have come to discuss your classification and to ensure the safety of the hegemony. We have many questions for you." Behind her, more figures stepped down from the ships. Some were guards, tall and strong, with armor built into their bodies. Others were officials and scientists, ready to begin the process of understanding what the system had classified as a naturally armored species. Teo stepped forward, trying to look confident and peaceful. "We welcome you," he said. "We are happy to answer your questions." But as he spoke, he wondered if questions and answers would be enough. He wondered if the hegemony would listen, or if their fear would be too strong. The next few days would be very important for humanity's future among the stars. Ambassador Vesper did not smile when she met Dr. Teo. She held her datapad in front of her like a shield, and her pale eyes looked at the human doctor with something between curiosity and fear. Behind her stood 7 guards, all of them much taller and more heavily built than any human. The smallest guard wore armor that covered his entire body, and his movement suggested he was trained for combat. "Please come with me," Vesper said, her voice polite but cold. "We will discuss matters in your main facility." Teo led the ambassador and her guards to the command center. The other members of his team watched as the alien visitors entered their space. No one was smiling. Everyone could feel the tension in the air, like a storm about to break. Vesper sat down at the main table and opened her datapad. She did not offer any greetings or pleasantries. Instead, she began to speak about the classification report. Her words were scientific and careful, but they carried a heavy weight. "According to the Galactic classification system," Vesper said, Your species demonstrates bone density measurements that exceed 92% of all recorded sapient species. Your cellular healing capacity is extraordinary. Your resistance to physical trauma is remarkable. These factors, combined with your obvious intelligence and tool-making ability, place you in the category of naturally armored species. This is a classification reserved for potentially dangerous life forms. Mi-sun leaned forward slightly. With respect, Ambassador, bone density is not a weapon. It is adaptation. Earth has high gravity. Our bodies evolved to handle that gravity. This does not make us dangerous. Vesper looked at Mi-sun with an expression that suggested she had heard this argument before and did not find it convincing. The classification system is based on objective measurements, she said. Emotions and context do not change the facts. You are naturally armored. Therefore, you are classified as Tier 3 threat. But we are not a threat, Yunji said, her voice becoming louder. We are scientists. We are explorers. We came here to learn about new worlds, not to hurt anyone. Vesper did not respond to Yunji's words. Instead, she looked at the guards behind her and spoke in a language that was not English. The guards moved forward and surrounded the humans. One guard, a massive creature with purple skin and a hard exoskeleton covering his body, stepped directly in front of Vesper. This was a Krell, a species bred for combat and physical strength. The hegemony has a protocol for naturally armored species, Vesper continued. We must collect genetic samples. We must perform medical evaluations. We must ensure that your biological nature is not a disguised threat to galactic stability. You want to take our DNA? Teo asked. He tried to keep his voice calm, but his heart was beating very fast now. Yes, Vesper said simply. This is not negotiable. You will cooperate, or we will use other methods to obtain what we need. Teo looked at his team. They all looked frightened. He wanted to refuse. He wanted to tell Vesper that humans had rights, that they could not be treated like animals in a laboratory. But he also understood that refusing would only make things worse. The hegemony had ships in orbit above them. They had weapons that could destroy the colony in seconds. We will cooperate, Teo said quietly. The guards began taking samples from each human. They used devices that took small amounts of blood and skin tissue. It was not painful, but it felt invasive and wrong. Yunji tried not to show her fear, but her hands were shaking as a guard approached her with a collection device. The guard was the Krell, the one with the hard exoskeleton. He was so large that he had to bend down to reach Yunji's arm. He grabbed her wrist with one of his powerful hands. Yunji pulled away reflexively, startled by the sudden strength of his grip. Her forearm moved up quickly. It hit the Krell's exoskeleton. The Krell made a sound like air leaving a balloon. He fell backward, holding his arm. The other guards looked shocked. Vesper's eyes widened. What happened? Vesper demanded. The Krell was writhing in pain now. One of the other guards came to help him. When they examined his arm, they found that it was broken. A human woman, weighing less than 100 kilograms, had fractured the arm of a Krell soldier just by pulling away from him. The guards immediately surrounded the humans. They pointed weapons at Dr. Teo and his team. Vesper stood up from her chair, and her calm expression was gone. Now she looked afraid and angry. You see? Vesper said, her voice rising. This is exactly what we feared. You are indeed naturally armored. You are indeed dangerous. You are creatures of violence. It was an accident, Mi-sun shouted. She was startled. She did not mean to hurt anyone. But no one was listening to Mi-sun's words. The guards were too focused on their fallen comrade. The Krell's arm was definitely broken, and the injury had happened so easily, so naturally, just from a human pulling her arm away. In the minds of the guards and in Vesper's mind, this confirmed everything the classification system had said. Yunji was crying now. She tried to explain that she had not meant to hurt anyone, that she was just scared, that it was an accident. But her words seemed to make things worse. In the eyes of the hegemony guards, an accident made humans even more dangerous. If humans could cause this much harm without even trying, what could they do if they actually wanted to hurt someone? "You will all be detained," Vesper said coldly. "You will be taken aboard my ship. There will be a hearing before the Hegemony Council. Your fate will be decided there." The guards moved forward and placed devices around the wrists of all the humans. These were restraints, designed to limit movement and monitor biological signs. Dr. Teo and his team were led out of the command center toward the ships. As they walked, Teo looked back at the human settlement, at the research station that had been their home for 8 months. He wondered if they would ever see it again. He wondered what would happen to them now that they had accidentally proven what the galaxy's fears had already suggested, that humans were powerful and dangerous. The injured Krell was being carried aboard one of the ships, his arm in medical support. As the last of the humans were led aboard, the ships began to prepare for departure. Within hours, the human settlement on Kepler 442b would be empty, and Dr. Teo would find himself standing before the Hegemony Council, facing charges that he did not know how to defend against. The misunderstanding had become much worse, and no one seemed interested in listening to the truth anymore. The Hegemony flagship was enormous. It was so large that entire cities could fit inside it. The human prisoners were taken to a detention area deep within the ship, in rooms that were small and cold. Dr. Teo and Dr. Misun were separated from the rest of the team. Yunji was placed in a different section. The other scientists were scattered throughout the detention block. Teo sat on a hard bed in his cell and tried to think. The walls were white and featureless. There was no window. A small light in the ceiling provided illumination. He had no way to know what time it was or how many hours had passed. The Hegemony had taken away his wrist device, his communication equipment, and anything else that might have been useful. He tried to understand what had happened. An accident. One simple accident had destroyed everything. Yunji had not meant to hurt the Krell guard. She had been startled and had pulled away. That was a normal human reaction to fear. But because her body was stronger than the Krell's, the result had been injury. And now the Hegemony believed that humans were dangerous creatures who attacked without warning. The logic was wrong, but Teo could see how it made sense from the outside. A naturally armored species that could break an experienced combat soldier with a simple pull of the arm was a threat. That was obvious to anyone looking at the facts without understanding the context. After what felt like many hours, guards came to his cell. They took him to a large room where Vesper was waiting. But she was not alone. Another figure stood beside her, and this figure was different from the guards and the ambassador. She was an ethereal like Vesper, but smaller and less impressive. Her skin glowed less brightly, and she wore simple clothes instead of official robes. "This is Rian," Vesper said. "She is a scientist from the research division. She will be examining your biological data." Rian stepped forward and looked at Teo carefully. Her expression was thoughtful, not afraid or angry like Vesper's. "I have been reading your genetic samples," Rian said. Her voice was soft and careful. "Your species is very interesting." "We are not weapons," Teo said. He had said this many times now, and each time it seemed to have less effect. "We are not naturally armored in the way you think. We are just adapted to Earth's environment." Rian nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, "I believe you. But I must prove this to the tribunal." Over the next several days, Rian visited Teo regularly. She asked him many questions about human biology, about Earth's gravity, about how humans had evolved over millions of years. She took detailed notes and studied the biological data that the Hegemony had collected from the human team. During one of these visits, Rian said something that gave Teo hope. "The classification system made an error," she said quietly. It compared your bone density to other species without considering context. It did not account for body mass. It did not account for metabolic rate. It did not account for evolutionary history. It simply compared numbers and made a judgment. Can you prove that to the tribunal? Teo asked. I am trying, Rian said, but the military wants to believe that you are a threat. The military is always afraid of new species. Fear is easier than understanding. The hearing before the Hegemony Tribunal took place in a large room with high ceilings. The tribunal consisted of 5 judges from different species, all of them looking serious and important. Vesper presented her evidence, the classification report, the broken arm of the Krell guard, video recordings of the incident, and medical evaluations showing the strength of human bone density. Then Rian presented her evidence. She showed detailed analysis of human physiology. She explained Earth's gravity and how it had shaped human evolution over millions of years. She showed mathematical calculations proving that human bone density was not naturally high compared to body mass, but rather normal for a species that had evolved on a high-gravity planet. Krell exoskeleton is equally natural armor, Rian said to the tribunal, yet we do not classify Krell as Tier 3 threats. We classify them as valuable military partners. The only difference is that we understand Krell biology because they have been part of the hegemony for thousands of years. We do not understand human biology because we have only just met humans. One of the judges, a creature with gray skin and 3 eyes, leaned forward. Are you suggesting that the classification system is biased? No, Rian said. I am suggesting that the classification system is incomplete. It measures physical traits without context. It compares species without understanding evolutionary history. A properly trained scientist would never make such a conclusion based solely on bone density measurements. The tribunal went silent. The judges looked at each other. Then they asked to see the video recording again. This time they watched more carefully. They saw that Yunji was clearly frightened and startled when the Krell grabbed her. They saw that she pulled away naturally, as anyone would do when afraid. They saw that the injury was an accident, not an attack. Even with high bone density, another judge said slowly, an accidental injury is not the same as a biological weapon. After hours of debate, the tribunal made a decision. They declared that the incident with the Krell guard was an accident caused by misunderstanding, not evidence of aggressive behavior. They also declared that the original classification was flawed and should be reviewed. However, they did not release the human team immediately. Instead, they proposed something new. Dr. Teo would be given an opportunity to propose a solution. If he could provide a way to prove that humans were not a threat to galactic stability, the humans might be released and the matter might be closed. Teo thought carefully about this opportunity. He knew that he had one chance to change the tribunal's mind. He remembered something that Rian had said. We do not understand human biology because we have only just met humans. Teo stood before the tribunal and made his proposal. Let us work together, he said. Let humans and the hegemony conduct joint research on human physiology, not to prove that we are harmless, but to understand how we work. Perhaps our resilience and adaptability can teach you something valuable. Perhaps our differences can lead to discoveries that benefit all species. Vesper looked angry at this suggestion, but Rian looked thoughtful. The tribunal members consulted with each other quietly. Finally, the chief judge spoke. Your proposal has merit, the judge said. We will allow a conditional release. You and your team will work with Dr. Rian in a joint research facility. If your cooperation proves genuine and if your research produces useful results, then the classification matter will be resolved permanently. As guards came to remove Teo from the tribunal chamber, Rian caught his eye. For the first time, she smiled. It was a small smile, but it felt like hope. The research facility orbited between Kepler 442b and the Hegemony flagship. It was a neutral space, designed to allow scientists from different species to work together on shared projects. Dr. Mi-sun and Rion stood together in the main laboratory, looking at data screens that displayed human biological information in many different formats. 6 months had passed since the tribunal's decision. The joint research program had begun slowly and carefully. At first, both human and ethereal scientists were cautious with each other. But as weeks turned into months, real collaboration began. Scientists are scientists, regardless of their species. The desire to understand how things work is universal. Yoonji worked in a separate section of the laboratory, analyzing cellular samples under powerful microscopes. She had recovered from her fear of the Krell Guard, and she was now producing some of the most interesting research data. She discovered that human cells could regenerate faster than most other species' cells. This was not a weapon. It was simply biology. It was the reason humans could recover from injuries more quickly than many aliens. Mi-sun and Rion were studying human bone structure in extreme detail. They used equipment far more advanced than anything available on Earth. They could see the microscopic structure of human bone, the arrangement of minerals and proteins that made human skeletons so resilient. "Look at this," Rion said, pointing to a data screen. "Your bone structure is not stronger because it is harder. It is stronger because it is flexible. It can bend without breaking. Most species either build bones that are very hard but brittle, or bones that are soft and flexible. Humans have both properties in the same structure." Mi-sun nodded slowly. "That is exactly right. Human bones evolved to handle stress. Earth is a high-gravity planet with many dangers. Our bones needed to be strong enough to support our weight, but flexible enough to survive falls and impacts. The solution our bodies developed was elegant, structure that combines strength with flexibility. The Krell exoskeleton is completely rigid," Rion said thoughtfully. "When the human woman pulled away, the rigidity of the exoskeleton broke because it could not bend. But human bone would have bent slightly and distributed the force. There would have been no injury if both parties had human bone structure. This was an important discovery. It meant that the accident with the Krell Guard had less to do with human strength and more to do with the fundamental difference between Krell exoskeletons and human bone. The injury was not evidence of human danger. It was evidence of biological incompatibility. As months continued to pass, the research program produced more and more interesting findings. Human cells could adapt to different environments more quickly than ethereal cells. Human metabolism was less efficient than Krell metabolism, but more flexible and adaptable. Humans could thrive in environments that would kill most other species. The most surprising discovery came from Yoonji's research into human pain tolerance and psychological resilience. She found that humans did not have a higher pain threshold than other species. In fact, humans were quite sensitive to pain. But humans had something that most advanced species had lost: the psychological ability to endure pain and continue functioning. "Look at this data," Yoonji said excitedly during a team meeting. She displayed images on the main screen. When a human experiences pain, the brain naturally produces chemicals that reduce the sensation and promote healing. But more importantly, the human brain is structured in a way that allows the mind to overcome physical discomfort through willpower and determination. It is not biological armor. It is psychological strength. Rion studied the data carefully. "This is remarkable," she said slowly. "The hegemony races relied on technology and genetic modification to overcome pain and injury. Over thousands of years, we lost the natural ability to endure. Humans have kept that ability alive." Mi-sun added another thought. "It is not just about pain. It is about adaptability. Humans can learn to do things that seem impossible. We can teach ourselves to survive in harsh conditions. We can adapt our minds as well as our bodies to new challenges." The research began to paint a very different picture of humanity than what the classification system had suggested. Humans were not naturally armored warriors ready for battle. Humans were naturally resilient survivors. They had evolved on a dangerous planet to overcome challenges through physical and mental adaptation. After 8 months of research, Rian compiled her findings into a comprehensive report. She presented this report to the Hegemony Council, and she invited Dr. Mi-sun and Dr. Teo to attend the presentation. Humans are not a threat, Rian said clearly to the council. The original classification was based on incomplete data. When we examine human biology in context and with full understanding, we see a species that is remarkable not for its weapons or armor, but for its incredible adaptability. Humans can survive almost anywhere. They can learn almost anything. They can endure almost any hardship. These qualities make humans valuable partners, not dangerous enemies. The council listened carefully to Rian's presentation. The military representatives still looked skeptical, but the scientific representatives looked thoughtful and impressed. One council member, an ancient being who had served the hegemony for thousands of years, spoke up. "I remember when we first encountered the Krell," the council member said. "We were afraid of them too. We thought their combat abilities made them dangerous, but we learned that they were simply evolved for a different environment, just as these humans are evolved for their world. The question is not whether they are dangerous. The question is whether we are wise enough to form partnerships with species we do not yet understand." Another research discovery had captured the council's attention. Yunji and Rian had found that human DNA contained information that could help improve medical treatments across multiple species. The cellular regeneration system in humans could potentially be adapted to help other species recover from injuries more quickly. "This is not theoretical," Yunji explained. "We have already used human genetic data to develop a new treatment for ethereal cellular damage. The treatment works. It reduces healing time by 40%. The council members leaned back in their seats, thinking about what they had heard. Humans were not weapons. They were resources. They were partners. They offered knowledge and capabilities that the hegemony did not have. After the presentation ended, Dr. Teo approached Rian. "Thank you," he said simply. "You could have let the fear take over. You could have supported the original classification. But you chose to understand instead." Rian smiled. "Science is about truth," she said. "Fear is never a good reason to abandon the search for truth, and the truth is that your species is remarkable. The hegemony is lucky to have found you." That night, the Hegemony Council made an official announcement. The classification of humanity as a naturally armored species was being overturned. Instead, humans would be reclassified as an emerging adaptive species, a designation that recognized their incredible ability to learn, change, and survive. The human team would be free to return to their colony or to continue working with the hegemony in joint research projects. 3 years passed. The news about the reclassification of humanity spread throughout the galaxy. But not everyone was happy about it. Some military leaders still viewed humans with suspicion. Some political factions worried that humans were too adaptable, too capable of learning and growing. If humans could adapt to any environment, perhaps they could eventually outcompete the hegemony across multiple worlds. Dr. Teo continued to lead the research station on Kepler 442b, but his work had changed significantly. Now he was not just a colonial administrator. He was an ambassador for his entire species, tasked with proving that humans could be trusted partners in a vast galactic community. More human colonies were being discovered regularly. Each time a new settlement was found, the same confusion arose. Each time, military vessels would arrive, ready to classify the humans as threats based on the old classification system. Each time, scientists like Rian had to explain that humans were not weapons. That high bone density was not natural armor. that humans were simply evolved for a world that was different from theirs. Dr. Misun had chosen to stay with the hegemony, continuing her research with Rion. She had become an expert in human biology and a respected voice in the scientific community. She traveled to different colony worlds, helping other researchers understand human physiology and defending humanity against outdated fears. One day, Teo received a message from Misun. Another human colony had been discovered, and the local military commander was threatening to arrest all the colonists until they could be evaluated. The commander still believed that high bone density was a sign of danger. "We need you to come," Misun's message said. "The commander will not listen to scientists, but he might listen to a human leader who can explain from experience." Teo left Kepler 442b and traveled to the new colony world. When he arrived, he found a tense situation. Human colonists were being held in temporary detention, and military guards surrounded the settlement. The commander of the forces was a Vorn, a species with thick skin and a reputation for rigid thinking. "Your people are dangerous," the Vorn commander said flatly. "The system classified you as naturally armored. Until that classification is officially removed from every database, I must assume you are a threat." "The classification has been removed," Teo said calmly, "and I can explain why it was wrong in the first place. Human bone density is not armor. It is adaptation. Humans evolved on a high-gravity planet. We are not weapons. We are explorers and scientists, just like any other species in the hegemony." The Vorn commander looked unimpressed, but other officials were listening. Scientists and diplomats who had traveled with the military force began to speak up. They explained what they had learned from the research. They talked about the medical breakthroughs that human biology had made possible. They described how human adaptability could help the hegemony expand to new worlds and overcome new challenges. Slowly, the commander's resistance began to weaken. Eventually, he agreed to release the human colonists, but with one condition. They would submit to regular evaluations to ensure they posed no threat. It was not perfect, but it was better than imprisonment or worse. This pattern repeated itself across the galaxy. Some commanders released humans immediately. Others required proof and evidence. A few remained convinced that humans were dangerous, no matter what the science said. But the overall trend was clear. Humanity was being accepted into the galactic community, though acceptance was sometimes reluctant. Meanwhile, a very different kind of dialogue was beginning at the highest levels of the hegemony government. Political leaders from the Seven Worlds were debating what the discovery of humanity meant for the future. Some saw humans as a resource to be controlled. Others saw humans as partners who could contribute to galactic civilization. And a few visionary leaders saw something even greater. One of these visionary leaders was a politician named Velmor, an ancient being who had lived for over 5,000 years. Velmor proposed something radical, a cultural and scientific exchange program. Humans would not just be studied and evaluated, they would be invited to share their culture, history, and knowledge with the hegemony, and the hegemony would share its vast accumulated wisdom with humanity. "We have been afraid of what we do not understand," Velmor said in a speech to the political council. "For thousands of years, our fear has prevented us from seeing the value in different species. We classify them, we control them, we keep them at a distance. But imagine what we could accomplish if we stopped being afraid. Imagine what we could learn from a species that has survived on a harsh world through determination and ingenuity." The council debated Velmor's proposal for weeks. Finally, they voted. The exchange program would be established. Humans would be invited to learn at hegemony universities. Scientists from the Seven Worlds would be invited to visit Earth and establish research stations on new human colonies. Yunji became the first human scientist to join a hegemony research institute. She worked on genetic studies that combined human and ethereal knowledge, producing treatments that neither species could have developed alone. Teo was eventually invited to become a representative in the Hegemony Council, giving humans a voice in the political decisions that affected the entire galaxy. It was an extraordinary honor for a species that had been classified as dangerous threats just 3 years earlier. But perhaps the most important change happened at the social level. Regular citizens from different species began to meet. They learned each other's languages. They shared meals and stories. An ethereal diplomat fell in love with a human botanist, and they married. Krell soldiers began to respect human athletes, not because humans were dangerous, but because they showed the same dedication to excellence that the Krell valued. The incident with the Krell guard who had broken his arm became a famous story, but it was no longer told as a warning about human danger. Instead, it was told as a cautionary tale about the dangers of fear and misunderstanding. A university on the ethereal homeworld created a course about the incident, teaching students how one accident and one misunderstanding had nearly caused conflict between species and how science and open-mindedness had prevented disaster. One day, that same Krell guard approached Yunji in a Hegemony Science Center. His arm had healed completely, and he wore the uniform of a peace officer rather than a soldier. "I owe you an apology," the Krell said. "I was afraid of you. I treated you roughly. If I had understood you better, the accident never would have happened." Yunji smiled. "And if I had understood your strength better, I would not have pulled away so suddenly. We were both afraid. Fear makes all of us do things we do not intend, but now we know better. We can be friends instead." The Krell extended his arm, and Yunji shook it carefully, both of them smiling. It was a small moment, but it represented something much larger, the possibility of connection between beings who had almost become enemies.